worry about things like that.
I'm recording to the cloud, so it should be shareable, which is good. Okay, so hello, Jackie and Keith and Alan. Hello.
Hi.
And congratulations, Jackie and Keith. Your book is published. It's out in the world. It was yesterday, was it, publication day?
Yep,
yes,
February the 4th.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yes,
and,
a long time coming.
Is it the first book for both of you, or are you both writers?
Totally,
right,
total novice authors, first time. Yeah, had no idea what to expect.
Yes, I was going to wait until I was the age of 61 for my first book, so that's what I've done.
So well done, very good. And you're both involved at the Troubadour in London, is that right? Keith, tell me about the Troubadour.
Yes, we are to give it a grand title, we're the co-curators of the Dylan Room at the Troubadour. The Troubadour in Earls Court being a wonderful, wonderful venue, almost a living museum to music history that Dylan first played in 1962, 63. Jimi Hendrix started out there. Paul Simon started out there.
Wow.
An absolutely wonderful place that everyone, when they can visit London, should go and see. And Jackie and I were on a pilgrimage to look around all the Bob Dylan places in London, not with a book in mind, with just a pilgrimage in mind. And we went into the Troubadour and found there was no sign of Bob Dylan having been there. Wow. And we thought, well, this is such a shame, basically, that such an important moment and time for Bob Dylan wasn't recognised there. And we asked the owners if we could we should put a picture up at first. And eventually they said, well, look, take a whole room and kit it out with Bob Dylan posters and the story of him in London and all sorts of stuff. So we were able to do that. And just before lockdown, it was a place where Dylan fans could go. And I think of recognising the Dylan Room, what an important place the Troubadour was for him.
Right. And so you were both doing that. You both doing that at the same time. You both have the same history with the Troubadour. In other words, I was going to ask Jackie how you got involved, but you were both doing that together, yeah?
Yes, it followed on, as Keith says, when we discovered very late in the day, having known each other since 1979, we didn't discover that we were each Bob Dylan fans until 2016, the Nobel Prize for Dylan. And then we went on this pilgrimage. And Keith's being slightly modest, it was his idea to have a room, because he had been telling me about the Ramones museum, in Berlin. And it was, even to me, I was thinking, well, if the Ramones can have a whole museum, surely Bob Dylan deserves a room somewhere in London, in this city, which has definitely got huge significance for his career.
Yeah, fantastic. So how far back does your love of Bob go?
Well, mine goes back, I suppose, to being a small child with my auntie on the Isle of Wight. But I was a toddler at the time, so not a toddler, but a young child, and I remember nothing except these strange hippie types that they were in 1969. But I went through the whole. I was a teenage Bob Dylan fan. I literally had posters of "Don't Look Back" on my wall. So it's a love that goes a long, long way back with the music. And Jackie was the same, except as she just said, you kept it to yourself a bit, really. In 1979, you didn't say, and you could like certain bands and not others, but it was a wonderful, wonderful musical part of my life, I have to say.
Jackie, I think you say you were a teenager when you.
I was.
Bob.
We didn't have pop music in my house. My dad was extremely anti-pop music. We had Radio 3 and Radio 4. We were allowed to listen to the chart show on a Sunday night. So I would just be in my bedroom finding pop music whenever I could on the radio. And then one day, I don't know if I was 13 or 14, but I was quite young. And I think it was the Jonathan King show. And he played Lay Lady Lay, which is perhaps not it's a very different voice for Bob Dylan, a very particular voice from a particular time. And I was I was blown away. I can't even explain it. I wrote to Jonathan King afterwards to thank him for having played it and for having introduced me. I went down to the market at the weekend, searched through the Dylan albums, found what I thought was the album that would have come off. It wasn't, it was a live album. And then just began trawling backwards through everything I would have missed. And then was able to catch up and move forwards through Blood on the Tracks, Desire, Street Legal. And by the time Keith and I met at university, Dylan was kind of on the cusp of his Christian era, his gospel, his converting everybody sort of era. And that, I think, is why I tried so hard to like those albums. But punk was around, post-punk. It was terribly exciting. We were in London, and you know, Bob Dylan kind of went onto the back burner a bit, really. There were some lost years in my fandom.
Yeah.
Well,
I was about this.
Those are lost years, and Jackie said it was odd that Bob Dylan was on this Christian era time, and the albums came out on the tour. I actually, because I saw Bob Dylan in '78, and then I saw him in 1981, and it was that gospel time. And I remember thinking I was very disappointed with all of that, and it wasn't right. And now you look back, and I saw someone else that was there at that 81, and he did a review of it, and he said, I was wrong. It was wonderful. We were totally wrong. It was probably one of his finest periods of live music. And, you know, even you take the albums, Slow Train onwards, they have wonderful albums.
Fantastic, yeah.
What were we thinking of?
Well, I have to say, I was there at the time in terms of, that was the first time I saw him live, 1981. It was at the NEC, not in London, but I absolutely loved it. And I was
you
about
were the one, Victoria.
I know, I was about 17 then. I discovered Bob again at about 13, 14. So just before Street Legal. I remember Is Your Love in Vain being in the charts, and I was already a Bob Dylan fan then. So the gospel thing came quite quickly after I had discovered him, and I loved it. So yeah, I feel like I've always been there with that.
I'm delighted that those years and those albums are being revisited again now. And I mean, particularly when they put out Trouble No More on the live versions.
That's
the gospel singers that he had with Clyde E. King, etc. Regina,
amazing,
just so wonderful. And even lost guitarists like Fred Tackett, who was a wonderful guitarist, but it didn't look like a rock and roll star. It looked like an old boy, and it was a bit lost. But so again, Bob appears in London at every stage, even then.
Absolutely. And it also is another, all through his career, he's divided people. And that comes through in your book, really, right from the start. And that is one obviously big area where a lot of people were disappointed, and maybe some fell away at that point. And I also know that, you know, the Christian community very much wanted to latch on to Bob as a Christian. You know, now we'd got one of the world's great stars as a Christian singer, and of course Bob wasn't going to stand for any of that, but that's, you know, he doesn't like anybody pigeonholing him all through his career. And that's what I think, just getting to the meat of your book, really, I think is it's time to do that, is what strikes me about him. He comes to London at the age of 21, fully formed, really, as somebody who is his own person. Just those stories about the Mayfair hotel, which, you know, the BBC had paid for him to come over, and he was put in this swanky hotel, but he didn't like it at 21, unknown in Britain, you know. I just thought that was him.
It was such a Bob thing to do, though, because I think he'd done that in Greenwich Village. He was the original sofa surfer, and he enjoyed that. He would go and stay with people, and he would learn from them. You know, mostly it was musicians or people interested in music, and he was a music magpie. He would move around, and here in 62, 63, he had people like Martin Carthy, who he could stay with, learn from, and that really is right from the start. As soon as he left Minnesota, that's the way he was. He was not going to stay still. And that would be including locations. He would make himself go around and get new experiences. I mean, you're right, in a way he was a bit fully formed.
Well, just in that respect, that he's always just been his own
Oh, totally.
Knows
his
what he
own
wants
person.
and isn't going to compromise. He wasn't going to wear a tie just because the hotel wanted him to. He'd rather change
Absolutely.
hotels, and it's that kind of attitude that is an awkward sod right from the start, really.
Perfect
Totally.
description.
I just wanted to read, if that's okay, the last sentence, because I love it, the last sentence of the book, which kind of is a conclusion, but I think it's also a great introduction to the book, where it says, London was the first tentative step out into the world for a young Bob Dylan, and it was the perfect melting pot out of which he would emerge as an artist who would go on to conquer the world. London will always have the honour of being the city which forged the greatest of modern songwriters. And it does sum up the book beautifully, but as I say, also introduces the book very well, I think. And what I thought about it was that you found very much a niche. We talked about this, Keith and I, just before we started recording, that it's a nicely focused book within. There's this great wealth of books on Bob Dylan, and you put a lovely picture, Keith, of your book nestled amongst all these other books over the decades that people have written. So you found a niche within the writing on Dylan, but it's not a niche in Bob Dylan's career. It goes right back to the start of his career, something that in different ways still, he appeared in London in 2019, and who knows, may come again. We can talk about that. So, tell us about those formative years in London, because it is something that's been with him through his career, really, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. London pops up all the time through his career. And what Jackie and I thought, and I think we're right, is there was a huge gap. You look at Dylan books, you look at the big, sometimes enormous biographies that people will put out on Bob Dylan. And some of them, I mean, even, for example, Robert Shelton, formative times such as the trip in 62, 63 is a paragraph. And, it's these aren't necessarily long period, 65 with the Don't Look Back period and the Savoy Hotel and Subterranean Homesick Blues and everything that means to Bob Dylan's time. You're only talking about weeks at a time, not years, but what it means to what we see as Bob Dylan and the image and the artist that he is just time and time again, it's in London, and it's the spark is here. And so much of what we know and we would imagine to be Bob Dylan comes out of London. And we didn't think it was given the right amount of airspace, if you like. It wasn't covered. And it was important that Jackie and I to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. And for me, there were three things that stood out. Two relations. Martin Carthy, who you've mentioned, who clearly was and I knew quite a lot about that, being somebody who's very interested in the English folk movement, with whom Martin Carthy is the godfather, really, since the revival in the 60s. And I love those stories about Carthy, introducing him to Lord Randall, and then the next time he sees him, Bob has written Hard Rain and is performing this song. This ability of Bob to just absorb these things and then put them into his own idiom and churn them back out as American songs. So there's Martin Carthy, there's Robert Graves.
It's American songs, but if just going back on that, it's American songs, yes, and he gives it his own image. And I personally feel that the Nobel Prize citation is wrong about the American songbook. It isn't. It's a world. It's a global thing, and it's a musical history that hasn't got a place. And I think it was amazing that, as you say, Martin Carthy can hear the opening bars of what he knows as Lord Randall, an old folk ballad. And there's a song about poison eels and maidens and all this sort of thing, but Bob Dylan's taken it into Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, which is a current comment on the nuclear times, and it's way beyond. He's taken it so many steps above an old folk ballad, and he hasn't just Americanized it. I don't know, is that a word? He hasn't just Americanized it, he's taken it into literature. He's taken it into real poetry, and he's taken it into social comment. Now, very few artists get even close to doing something like that with a song.
Yeah, it is amazing. It's amazing. And the other one was Robert Graves, who I didn't really know much about that he met Robert Graves. That's a really interesting relationship, because clearly for Dylan it was hugely important, but after that initial meeting, once Dylan came back and was famous, Robert Graves didn't seem to want to know anymore, do you think?
No, he was Robert Graves was a huge literary figure. I mean, we forget about how big books like I, Claudius were at the time. He was an enormous international bestseller and a huge literary figure. And Dylan and a lot of the beat culture loved a book called The White Goddess, which was mystical nonsense, but they like the idea of a lot of the images in that and the symbolism. But Robert Graves he was a funny old devil. He wasn't gonna particularly, although in fact he helped to set up the Troubadour. He could put money
really?
into that. Yeah, no, he was interested in the music. What he wasn't interested in was a brash American.
Yeah.
And also in his own private life, if people want to read about Robert Graves, they can read about his relationship with his wife. His wife ran off with an American, and it was deeply entrenched in him that he wasn't going to like a 21-year-old American with cowboy boots. And Dylan came into this. We researched this through, for example, tiny snippets. You know, Bob Dylan's not going to tell you very much about his life, even in his own autobiography. But, you know, Chronicles has a tiny snippet about him meeting Graves and the square that they walked and they talked in. You know, so we had some of that from the horse's mouth as such. But it was piecing everything together, pieces of the jigsaw to get to the actual story. And it is my view, and there's kind of a bit of conjecture here, that following that meeting, you know, we know that Dylan talked about it for hours in the Star Cafe. You know, he was very, very taken with having met his literary hero. You know, and I think from that time on, Dylan was, again, it was the spark of a different path. He wasn't just going to be a folk singer.
Yeah.
You know, and shortly thereafter, Dylan started Tarantula, really, and there was a literary impetus there. He did want to write books.
Yeah.
And you look at the images and the footage from the Savoy Hotel. He's typing. He's not writing his lyrics. He's typing.
Yeah.
He's being a writer.
Yeah.
I think
that's interesting.
That's what he wanted to be from that. There's a great story about, apparently he was in the back of a cab with Albert Grossman, and I'm not sure where they were going. But he was in the back of the cab with the typewriter on his knees, typing Chimes of Freedom.
Really?
And it's like, this is a guy. This is a guy who's thinking, if I'm not writing stuff down, I want it typed. This is going to go in museum.
Yeah.
I'm determined. This is what I want to do. You know.
Yes.
And you can
amazing.
There, you know. And I know you go. I've been to the British Museum to see the wonderful handwritten lyrics of Lennon and McCartney and people like that.
Yeah.
Dylan's going to type them. Dylan's a writer. Dylan's a literary figure. He's not just a folk singer, and that spark comes out of there, I'm sure.
Yeah, amazing. The third thing that and this is all about me really so far, and I'll give you a chance to say what you want to say in a minute, but the other thing is the video for Subterranean Homesick Blues that comes out of that time in London, which remains iconic, and you know, it's hailed as the first music video, and still, as you say in the book, it's still influential on other filmmakers and other songwriters and so on. And for me, you know, it still remains, doesn't it? It's as cool today as it was. If you made it today, it would still be cool 55 years later. It's very simple. There's none of the whiz bang effects that we can get into pop videos these days. And Bob Dylan doesn't sing in it. He's just standing there throwing out handwritten cards, laundry cards. I always thought it was in New York for a long time. As you say in the book, it looks like it could be America, but it's actually quite a swanky part of London near the Savoy Hotel. Anyway, why is that video such a major thing, do you think?
As you say, it was really the first to you know, to take a song and to put an imagery with it that suited it so brilliantly. You know, the style of the song and the style of this throwing the cards down and just drawing out the words. And the words, of course, themselves are, you know, Keith, I think, was asked recently, well, what's it actually about? Who knows, you know?
It's just
Well, as Bob
yeah.
Dylan would say, it's about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A bit less than that, I think. So yeah, so it's just, as you say, Victoria, it's just really iconic.
Yeah.
Just of that particular time, and yet it just translates now to be cool, which is why other people copy it and maybe you know, do pastiches of it, etc. But it wasn't a simple process. They tried different, you know, different places.
That was nice in the book.
There's 3 locations that they tried. The roof of the Savoy Hotel was one, and that didn't work because it was very windy, and poor Bob was really struggling to hold the cards and to throw them in order. And then the Embankment Gardens as well, just around the corner from the Savoy, just a stone's throw, where there was an art exhibition, and the police had to move Pennebaker on because they were in the way. But then I think the middle of the ones that was tried was Savoy Steps, and you just can't imagine it looking any other way.
It's just made to be there,
and
isn't
every
it?
aspect of it, just the, you know, it's Ginsberg and Neuwirth, I think, loitering on the corner with walking sticks, which we believe may have been broom handles, or Woolworths on the Strand at the time. There's a beautiful car just parked somewhere down that alleyway, scaffolding. And it has it leaves such an impression. It's amazing.
And I suppose the song itself was very important as a song. And there's that lovely bit in Don't Look Back where all the girls are getting his autograph and saying, oh, we don't like the new song, it doesn't sound like you, but it's the start of his new direction, isn't it? And such. Right, who is it in the book who says somebody says it's such a great, you know, the lyrics blew him away. I can't remember who it was now who said that, but you mention it in the book. But the song itself, I guess, is.
I mean, it was a reasonable hit over here. It didn't go down as well in America, but
right.
But that was the same for lots of Dylan.
Well, exactly.
And again, better here.
We've got to appreciate that a lot of, you know, Dylan's fans are over here and abroad outside of America, and we've been I think pretty good to him over the years.
I think he does appreciate that. I think he likes British audiences.
I think so. But what we wanted, Jackie was saying about, you know, obviously the video is at the Savoy Steps, and the joy, as with the Troubadour Club, as with the King and Queen, as with other venues, is they are all still in existence exactly as they were in the 60s. And you know, and that's why there's a map in the book, is we wanted people to visit these places. It was a shock to us. You know, I go with Jackie or others at times, and we've taken our placards down to take our picture at the Savoy Steps, and occasionally we've seen, but that's, you know, there should be queues around the block of tourists ready with their placards. You know, this is such an important part of music history. And, you know, we are very, very good at music in this country, but we're so awful at celebrating it.
It's true.
And, you know,
well, maybe your book will.
We're world beating at, and we keep it to ourselves, you know,
world
it's extraordinary. But it's wonderful. And, you know, as part of our pilgrimage, Jackie and I did attempt to get a plaque put up where Subterranean Homesick Blues was filmed, because we thought, well, first music video, surely there should be some recognition here. But unfortunately, on one side, it's the Savoy Hotel, is that wall where Ginsberg is, and the other side is the chapel of the Savoy
Queen's Chapel,
Queen's Chapel of the Savoy, where which is obviously belongs to Her Majesty.
Right.
And, we had
who's not a Bob Dylan fan, clearly.
Very nice communication from the chap that runs it, his flight lieutenant or whatever he was. And unfortunately, Her Majesty won't let a plaque go on the wall there just at the moment. But we may try again. Someone asked me the other day, why don't you put it on the pavement? And we haven't thought of that. Where Bob stands.
That would be great. It's certainly something worth persevering with, I would say.
Look out for this campaign coming soon.
And your book might be instrumental in encouraging people to get more stuck into that. So let's hope that it does. The other place we haven't yet talked about is the Royal Albert Hall, which clearly is a huge thing in Bob's career. The 65 and 66, you mentioned the contrast between those two, both fantastic in their way, but the 66 one very difficult, presumably, for Bob. And then he doesn't come back to London for 12 years. And then 2013, 2015, I saw both those gigs. Do you think that was a kind of homecoming for him? Do you think that was a deliberate thing for him to want to revisit the Albert Hall after that difficult 66 tour? I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. That's a good question. I would like to know the answer to that. I don't know, what other options he had. Like, it was notable that in which was the Palladium year, Keith, 2018 or 17, that it was the Palladium that he chose. So yeah, who knows sometimes. But you're absolutely right. The Royal Albert Hall is just so fascinating for its part in his story, and for that, within the space of a year, 2 utterly different concerts and totally different receptions. One, and I think it was just so fascinating that Dylan himself had already started to get bored of the audiences loving him. He said he could predict what they were going to do, and I don't think he's a man who he doesn't want to rest on that. So even by 65, he was already getting a bit bored. Obviously the audience wasn't, and I would do anything to have
I know, me too. I think we all would.
But the solo image, and then the 66, this incredible decision to try and please everybody by doing one half of the set acoustic solo, and then shock horror bringing the band on behind him for the second half. Keith will always say he thinks that was very calculated to shock, a deliberate decision, whether it was.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of, whether it was deliberate at the start. I think certainly as things went on, Albert Grossman knew there were headlines here, and I think the fact that, as you say, it was the first half was Bob, guitar, harmonica, that was it, and then the second half, suddenly this band appeared and it was cranked up to number 11, and they obviously always started with Tell Me Mama, which is, in my view, if that's not kicking off punk music, I don't know what is in 1966. And it's wonderful. And they knew a little bit what they were doing. But as Jackie did a lot of research about the acoustics and everything at the Royal Albert Hall, and talked to people that were there. And a lot more people walked out because it was loud and they couldn't hear it terribly well than did because it was a protest against him not doing folk music anymore. It was a lot of acoustics and loudness to do with that.
And the poor guy who had built the what do you call that word? The amplifying stuff. The rig.
Right. Okay.
What's the word for it?
Is it
rig? Is it?
The rig. I'm sorry, I'm not very technical.
I'm not very good at that technical
on this
stuff.
thing, but all the speakers and the amplifiers. He had very little time to put this together. They had because the first part of that tour, when it had left America, had gone to Australia. And Albert Grossman instructed, I think his name is Richard Alderson, who did all the sound stuff for the 66 tour. He instructed him to leave it in Australia and to create a brand new one for the rest of the tour. He had some idea he was going to make some money out of it by renting it out in Australia. But Richard Alderson basically said there's this lovely clip of him where he talks about the 66 tour and what was expected. The type of volume that was going to be required was just not something he was experienced in, and very few people were, apparently, which I still find that incredible. So even just how to place the microphones, so it's a fascinating tale, and I think Richard Alderson was really up against it to try and create the equipment, to have the right equipment that would do the best for the sound. But as Keith said, I think by then, possibly for some people, it just didn't matter anymore. It was just this barrage of noise. And I mean, I've listened to some of the recordings, and I mean, maybe they've been tinkered with, I don't know, but you can definitely hear the words.
Yeah.
And
if you listen to Tell Me Mama, which is the loudest, brashest one to start with, it's still wonderful. The audio we have, there's
yes,
people look on YouTube and see the Paris version of that, where they would it was, I think it was shock value, but it was still stunning music. And
That's
yes,
what Robbie Robertson said, that we knew the music was good, and it may be that it just
exactly.
sounded different in the audience.
Sure, exactly. No, it was, and as Keith said, not everybody hated it. There's a clip on No Direction Home, I think, the Scorsese film, where people are leaving, and some people are saying, "Traitor, it was awful. We didn't come to see this rubbish," and then other people are saying, "It was fantastic," and let him do what he wants. So even back then, as you said, Victoria, he was dividing opinion, and has gone on to divide opinion.
And always will, I guess. Yes.
I guess.
And isn't worried about that at all.
Oh, that's the most important thing, isn't it? He will plough his own furrow, whatever. Yeah. And
he's
I think that's
80 now, he's not going to change. Well, he's going to be 80. He was coming to that 80 in May, isn't he?
Yes.
Have you got any celebrations planned at the Troubadour for his 80th?
Well, we don't know.
Depend on
At the
lockdown.
moment, the Troubadour's in mothballs, really.
Yes.
What they're doing with their time until they can reopen is moving the stage around, so it's the original place where Dylan and Hendrix and Paul Simon and Adele all stood. So they're using the time well. But once it's open, it would be nice to think that we can have some kind of book launch there, and we help with a band called the Dylan Band, who are truly wonderful if you ever get the chance to see them. And Jackie and I help to what do we do, co-manage them? I don't know.
I don't know. We help them wherever we can. We've managed to get them a residency at the Troubadour. We also persuaded the great Dylan writer Michael Gray to come to the Troubadour.
Yes, I wish I'd been able to come to that. I would love to.
They were fantastic. He's done two, and they're just absolutely brilliant. He's a great speaker, incredibly entertaining. And obviously,
and an encyclopedia of
absolutely. And Michael's been a great supporter of our work, really. It's an entirely different kind of Bob Dylan book that Jackie and I have done, because
we wanted to break the mold.
Because there are people like Michael Gray who've written so many wonderful books about the lyrics and about what I didn't want to do that. Jackie didn't do that. It's been done well by people like that. But we wanted to tell the stories. The stories and the people and those interesting parts of history that we wanted to get across. And to recognise the locations as well.
That's what I meant to start. You found a really great focus for something that hasn't really been done before, and yet it's something that's so important to Bob's career, as you've shown.
Yes, critical, really. In terms
what we were hoping for was that we would see people with the book in their back pocket.
Going around
and
trail.
looking at the stories. It's very much about getting people out there to appreciate these places.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hope that. I'm sure it will once people can get out and about again.
Yes.
And is there anything I haven't talked about that you wanted to say about the book or about anything really?
No, we bring it really, as you said, Bob Dylan finished here in '66 and then he took himself away from the world.
Do you have any theories about why he didn't come back? I mean, he made those great records in the 70s, but didn't come back to tour them in the UK. Did he fall out of love with London?
No.
Is it his family? Is it just something we'll never know?
It's a shame. It was such a large gap, 12 years until he came back to the mainland here, other than the Isle of Wight. So 1978, he came back. I think 1978, you have to look in the sort of chronology of Bob Dylan. That was his first tour to Japan, for example. He was deciding he would go back on a global stage. That was a very different, and he was ready for that. There is the saddest line, I think, in literature I read recently in a Clinton Halen book, Day by Day, was that there is one entry whenever it is in 1975 that apparently Bob Dylan came over with his management to look at the possibility of a Rolling Thunder tour in England.
Oh
I
wow.
thought, oh no, please, I
Oh,
wish
wow.
I didn't know that had happened in a way. But can you imagine Bob Dylan and all Joni Mitchell and
Scarlett
Scarlett Rivera, etc.,
Mm.
doing the university circuit in
Oh.
England? How wonderful would that have
Yeah.
been?
I'd probably still have been too young, so I don't feel too bad about that. But
Oh, I'd have gone for you, Victoria. Don't worry. But it's
it would have been amazing. It would.
yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great what ifs of musical life. But there you go. There you go.
We can at least enjoy the Rolling Thunder Review film.
Absolutely.
Really brilliant.
It is brilliant. I agree.
Really so watchable, brilliantly
Fantastic.
put together, and of course with the little twists in there
Yeah.
of the completely
Yeah.
invented characters.
Superb. Yeah.
But what a tour! I mean, only Bob Dylan could come up with that.
I know.
And apparently he'd wanted to do this sort of like carnival sort of tour thing for a long time.
Yeah.
But what a crazy, wonderful thing to just decide to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and say the very few artists would have even considered something as crazy as that. But it's just beautiful.
One of the things I love about it is seeing Joan Baez kind of rehabilitated.
Yes.
With him and, you know, all looking really relaxed with him and. Because I really do like Joan Baez a lot, and I think she got quite badly treated. Not by Dylan exactly. Dylan treated people exactly, you know, how he wanted to. I think she understood Dylan well enough, but there were other people around Dylan, I think, and so I love her.
I'm not even convinced that Dylan treated her that well, to be honest.
No, but I mean, Dylan didn't single her out for that treatment, is what I meant. He would treat anybody badly if they just didn't happen to, you know,
with what he wanted to do. Yeah.
Well, I think she always says that because, you know, she'd had Dylan on stage in the early years and she'd done that, she went on the tour thinking he was going to do the same. And I personally think it was basically down to Bob Dylan being a little bit embarrassed and thinking, and never having that conversation, Joan, I'm doing this now, and, you know, are you okay with it? But they didn't. We have to remember they were still quite young.
Yeah, he was very young. 24 or something.
But it's true, they were by then going in such different directions. As he said, you know, I could fit into her show, but she couldn't fit into mine. It would have been stupid. I don't know what word he used, but it was something like would have been stupid, would have been mad. But clearly there was a great love between them and a great respect between them, and it just the Rolling Thunder Review seemed to allow that to all be back in
because there's that really poignant scene, isn't there, in Don't Look Back, where he's typing in the hotel room and she's singing along, and then she just leaves the room and we don't see her again in the film after that. It's just very subtly done.
But I think it's one of Dylan's friends, Newworth. He makes an extremely insulting comment to her, and that's what I meant about it was people in his party who see, oh right, we know that Bob no longer is rating Joan as a someone to be on stage, so now we can take it out on her. It's not nice. But
she gave a lovely film clip recently. She did this series of portraits of people who've changed society, and Bob was one of them. It was a portrait. She paints really well, and so she'd got this portrait she painted of young Bob, and was very generous about his songwriting, and she was laughing about it as a kind of self-mockery thing, that she knows they've got history, but incredibly generous towards him, and acknowledging whatever else has gone on between them, that he is still somebody she reveres as a songwriter.
I agree. She's very generous, and there's no sense that she holds grudges. She knew him. She knew what he was, and but she was young, and gosh, it was so public as well. That humiliation, horrible.
Which is, as you say, Jackie, it's nice then that Rolling Thunder came along. And they were rehabilitated
totally, and they look so comfortable together, and they're
so much fun.
There's that bit where she imitates him, doesn't she? And it's like, they could really have a joke together. So it's like,
I think everyone's having fun except Mick Ronson, who's at the back not knowing what's going on.
I always feel sorry for Mick Ronson. He's always left out somehow.
He tends to go through his whole life like that.
He's always on the fringes, isn't he?
He didn't
He's
know
such a key person for lots of people, but he never gets anywhere. any of the limelight.
No.
Not to talk about Nick Ronson, but yeah, it's great to see him there.
I think you asked if there was anything else. I think the only other thing we would want to say is how lucky we have been with people who've supported us within the book itself. So Andrew Muir just wrote such a beautiful foreword to the book, and he's obviously a character in the Camden chapter as well.
That's lovely, that story in the Camden chapter.
It is, and I think his foreword is a chapter really in itself.
Right. Yeah.
I was particularly pleased with that, and being able to get the Camden story told and the Crouch End story as well.
Yeah.
And I think with let's say Jackie's right, we've had amazing support from Dylan fans and people through this whole project. And we were first time authors after all these years. We didn't know how you wrote a book or what we should do. We were totally naive about it. And one of the first things that made us think, actually, crikey, we've got a nice book here, we've got a good, interesting book, was when Conor McPherson, who did the play Girl from the North Country, which we absolutely loved. That was another thing in recent years that just bowls you over how wonderful that was. And he came back and he gave such a wonderful appraisal of the book, just loved the book. And that was when I thought, Jackie and I have written a good book here.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to put a Conor McPherson quote on the cover as well.
Oh,
really
absolutely.
Nice.
Sorry, I just have to let my cat out. She's
yes.
Always let the cat out, for goodness sake.
Very
Otherwise,
important.
dreadful things will happen. But
yeah, brilliant. So somebody had put on Twitter that there's a newspaper clip that's thought to be the first British review of a Bob Dylan concert in 1960. I'm just wondering if there's another volume in there somewhere. Have you got plans to write anything else?
The chap that's mentioned the Establishment Club.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
No, I've had discussions with him on this, and I understand what he means. No, fair enough. Look, there is.
Don't mind about that anecdote particularly.
No. There is definitely more. We wanted a handy, easy guide, so we can't get everything in.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have done more of the latter stuff as well. We cover 1981 tour in a sentence. There's very little on that because we wanted to concentrate on certain bits. That first time when Dylan came over in 62 63 was a matter of 4 or 5 weeks, during which he had to fit in filming a BBC play, going to Italy and coming back again. We know of the nights that he played at the Troubadour. We hope we've put definitively in order where he played, so King and Queen, and also that we identified the Singers Club as the Pinter of Wakefield.
Yeah.
So playing in those, and those are the ones we concentrate. And one of the main reasons is because there's photographs of Bob playing there, so we know he played there. There are other candidates for where he may have played. The Establishment Club, there is this one review. That's it. And there's nothing else. And no one else ever says they saw him there or anything.
Interesting.
There's no other evidence, if you like. So he may, people say he visited a folk club in Surbiton.
Right.
Well, he can't have fitted all this. He's supposed to have fitted an affair with the artist Pauline Boty. I mean, come on. I know it's Bob Dylan, but he can't fit all of this in.
Part of the mythology.
Done all of this, He's very good at fitting stuff in. Crikey,
Yes.
So we don't know. We've concentrated on the ones that we know.
Yeah.
There's photographic evidence where there are witnesses, and it's quite possible he played at other ones. But they're mentioned, but we just don't know.
But no current plans to write another book.
Not about London. Keith has some further afield projects in mind.
Moving on to a similar kind of guide, but to do New York in the tales that aren't told there. And you've got such a wealth of stuff there. It's totally different. There is so much about New York that's written, but I think there are parts that are missed off. Of that. And I think to concentrate on some of the characters, like I'm fascinated by people like Karen Dalton, just extraordinary.
Amazing,
who need, and Peter Lafarge and others that have wonderful tales there, and I'm hoping to bring that out. And then I would like to do a book about Bob Dylan in Europe. I think the tales from his never-ending tours gone on since 1988. He's done a lot.
Yeah,
there's a lot out there. And then hopefully Japan, because there's a huge Dylan fan base there.
Oh, wow.
He totally left his mark in Japan. But we shall see. We shall see.
Yeah, lots of ideas.
That's to keep me going now. I've started.
Fantastic. Well, I love the book. So, and I really hope that, once, as you say, once people can get out and about more easily, it will become a kind of guide for Dylan fans to explore some of these places. And
we hope it appears in the shop window.
Yes, well, it certainly will, even before we open again.
Lovely.
I'll have people queuing up to buy it, I'm sure.
Lovely, lovely.
Alan, we haven't talked to you at all. Would you anything you'd like to contribute to this whole?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. It's better I remain in the background, as it were.
Fine.
It's very interesting. It's always good to listen to interviews.
Alan is our wonderful PR person, our wonderful PR team, aren't you, Alan?
I am indeed, Keith. Yes.
Team.
And that's the thing, we've been blessed. I mean, Alan's been absolutely fantastic on all of this side, and we've been blessed. Team Troubadour Tales is a blooming good team.
Right. Fantastic.
We really are.
We're number one in the folk music about books in Amazon, folk music.
Brilliant.
Books. We're already bestsellers on day one.
Hooray. Well, it doesn't get much better than that, I guess, if you've published the book. Brilliant. Oh, well, thanks so much for talking and expanding on this whole lovely episode, or it's more than an episode, aspect of Dylan's career. It is endlessly fascinating, and there's always, as we can see, new things to explore even now after all these years. So
we should interview you, Victoria.
Absolute joy.
It's always good to talk about Bob. I don't get to talk about Bob often.
No, I think we should definitely interview you. You've obviously had quite a lot to say. I'd love to do that.
Sorry, yes, I do talk too much.
No, before, not at all. No. Well, we can't talk enough about Bob Dylan, but to talk with people who have seen him, who followed his career all the way through the ups and downs, that's a different type of conversation you can have then.
Absolutely.
Yes. And a great joy in Dylan Twitter, you are.
Yeah, definitely. Are you on Twitter, Jackie? I may have missed you on Twitter.
I was tweeting for the band when
okay.
But as they have not been able to play they played once since March of last year when lockdown temporarily was lessened, and so I did their tweeting, but doesn't seem a lot of point.
Not much happening.
So, but when they get going again, I might rejoin that. I'm doing a YouTube channel for the book at the moment. That's my that's my
great. So I'll have a look at that. Yes.
So, and if
anybody who is watching this, look for that. And also the Twitter feed for Dylan in London. That's for it's Barbourville, isn't it? Your handle.
Yeah. But, do you say handle? Probably do say handle. I don't.
Handle. I think they say handle.
I always thought it was feed, actually. Twitter feed.
My Twitter feed.
I think what you're called though with the bit with the @ I think might be your handle. Okay. I'm really not the person to ask.
Okay, I expected that to be like a trucker's name or something.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
Showing my ignorance. Anyway.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Victoria.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to chat.
And thank you very much.
Send us the address so we can get in the
I will do.
shop. Okay.
I will do. And I'll send you the link to this in case you want to watch it back.
Lovely. That'd be brilliant. Are you going to put this up on Twitter?
Yes, absolutely.
Lovely.
If you want me to. Only if you want me to.
Yes, definitely.
And it can be put up on YouTube as well, on the YouTube channel. Yes.
Brilliant.
That'll be great.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Nice to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.